I'm here to testify on a bill that I submitted. It is HB 6956. It's a car seat act concerning car seats. I submitted testimony, so I would just like to introduce two people who are here who have expansive knowledge. I just want to mention that both of this language has been supported by the American Academy of Pediatrics, Yale New Haven Children's Hospital, Emergency Medical Services, AAA, police and fire departments across the state, and the Injury-Free Coalition for Kids. To my left is Pina Villano, Manager in Injury Prevention and Outreach Research from Yale New Haven's Children's Hospital, and to my left is Fairfield resident Nick Asa from Yale New Haven's Children's Hospital Community Outreach and Education. He also teaches certification classes to police and fire departments across the state. And I will hand it over to
Thank you.
Pina.
Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to be here. We're fortunate to work for an organization that values the safety of children and dedicates an entire department to this value. I'm a registered nurse with over 36 years experience in pediatric critical and emergency care. I'm a nationally certified child passenger safety technician, and I have extensive training in transporting children with special health care needs. I know all too well firsthand the devastation that injuries cause to children of all ages, their families, and the community as a whole. I have the responsibility to develop and implement evidence-based programs that have a lasting impact on the lives of children and their families. Child passenger safety is one of the nation's most significant injury prevention initiatives, considering that the leading cause of death and serious injury for young children are motor vehicle crashes. Additionally, I'm a researcher who in 2015 completed my PhD in public health and actually studied Connecticut's current law on child passenger safety. Like other states nationwide, Connecticut has roughly 73% of car seats that are either installed improperly or misused. This alarming statistic fully supports the necessary changes to further enhance Connecticut's child passenger safety law and comply with the recommendations of the expert panel from the American Academy of Pediatrics. My study was conducted using the Connecticut Crash Data Repository to evaluate the effectiveness of our law. The results suggest that the impact of Public Act 05-58 is effective in children being placed in child safety restraints. Increased use of the restraints had a protective effect on the safety of children transported in motor vehicles. As a result, there were many children that avoided injury and even death because of our law, especially in the 4-, 5-, and 6-year-old age groups, who usage rates increased to up to over 35%. Strengthening the law would further increase the number of kids that are prevented from injury and death. Thank you.
And as Brenda mentioned, I'm a child passenger safety technician and instructor.
Just state your name.
Nick Asa. And I'm also a child passenger safety technician and instructor, and have nearly 15 years experience in the field. And just to reiterate and not waste your time, basically the language in this law comes from statistics and evidence-based approach, and would entertain any questions for you.
Thank you. And you're not wasting our time, believe me. We just try to, and I mean that sincerely, we just try to keep everything in order here. And that's why it's important to get these all these documentations for all the members to read. And this is a serious issue. I do have some questions for you. So what do we do now then in regards to why do we need this? Are we setting this up the wrong way? Are parents putting them in the wrong way? Or is it the statistics have changed, so we need to change?
Yes, and one of the things is, quite honestly, most parents don't know. Not as a fault to them. They just don't know how to properly install their seat, how to properly restrain their child in that seat. And so over my years of experience, I've never been able to really find a direct correlation between wealth or education or anything. It's confusing. The manuals are confusing, and right now our law is pretty old school. It doesn't comply with today's data and statistics, and what we're doing now is we're putting kids at risk by letting them graduate out of certain systems of a child restraint too early. So that's where our big problem is now.
And I'm curious because it's been a long time since I had a car seat in my car. But there is one now because I did become a grandfather. And I know Representative Moore and I talk about this at times. So, I sent my daughter, obviously went to the police department, which helped, put it in place and all that. And so, what is it, up to 2 years, they're supposed to be put in looking in the back, correct?
That is the recommendation, not the law. Currently, the law requires that at 1 year old and 20 pounds, when they meet both criteria, they reach their first birthday and they're 20 pounds, they can legally be flipped forward. Yes, they could be forward, but what Pina mentioned, the American Academy of Pediatrics in 2011 had an expert panel recommend, and that's what we go by as a best practice, that a child should remain rear-facing until a minimum of 2 years old, which is what we've proposed in this legislation. But the best practice recommendation is go to the height and weight limit of the seat. And every seat has it printed on there how much they can weigh and how tall they can be for both rear and forward.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So what happens if a 2-year-old, because, obviously when you see the baby in the back seat of this car seat, the legs obviously are hanging over.
Mm-hmm.
Is it then, are they too big maybe into that car seat where their legs are like, that's why maybe they moved it to the front so they can overhang?
And I'll tell you, that's an excellent question, and it's one that I hear on a daily basis. I will tell you
I am in the construction business, so I use, this my technology there too.
There you go.
I thought Mike Riley might get a kick out of that, you know what I'm saying?
I will tell you, my son is actually over 3 years old. He was 3 last October, and he still sits rear-facing pretty comfortably because kids' joints aren't fully formed until they're older. So if I slept like my kid did with his knees to his chest, I'd be in the emergency department, Kids can dangle their legs, sit crisscross. It's a misconception. It's a great question, but what we do to educate parents is we tell them that statistically they're actually safer in a rear-facing position because they're cradled and they go into a cannonball position in a frontal collision, whereas if they're forward-facing, not only do their heads and necks fling forward, which they don't in a rear-facing, but their lower extremities, their legs actually kick up and fly and hit the seat in front of them. They hit the door in a side impact, so they're actually more at risk forward-facing for lower extremity injuries than rear.
And just to add too, that other nations have actually jumped on the bandwagon and have looked at statistics and have kept the kids rear-facing till 4 years of age, like Australia and the UK. So they've actually gotten smart and know that it makes a big impact on injuries and death in kids.
I'll tell you, this is very interesting. I appreciate all of you coming here to testify and letting us know this. I know there's members here who are going to ask questions. So just one quick before I hand it over to Senator Leone. Is there a stat in regards if we kept them that long? Well, other states are doing it, other countries, as you said, that we've seen
there's
a
actually
drastic...
a few states now that have the bill out. Connecticut, Washington State, Oregon, Nebraska, and Texas have bills currently proposed to require kids to remain 2 years of age, and 4 other states already have this requirement. And Connecticut's been a model state, and so it's only natural that...
And the pediatric doctors all in favor of this too?
Yes, and we actually have someone...
Absolutely, and I'm not sure if they're going to get the chance to speak, but some of them have submitted testimony for sure.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for coming here. I'm going to hand it over to Senator Leone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you everyone for coming to testify on something that protects our kids, because I don't think anyone wants to not do everything possible to do just that. In terms of the seatbelts, I know sometimes the seatbelts are not put in properly, right? But I know when I had our child, when he was a small one, we went to the local police force and they helped us install it properly on how to do it and how to not do it. So I think an education awareness is very critical as this moves forward. But then I'm also thinking on all the folks that have front-facing seatbelts. Are some of the seatbelts out there? Are all the seatbelts out there? And this is where I'm not an expert. Can they be transitioned to a rear-facing seatbelt mechanism, or would a parent that has a current model have to then go out and buy new models if this law were to be enacted?
It's actually a very good question, and I would guess that the majority of people with children under 2 that have already gone forward-facing are in what's called a convertible seat, which starts out rear-facing and goes forward-facing. The seat belt or lower anchors are actually what attaches the seat to the vehicle, but the 5-point harness built into the car seat is what secures them into the car seat. So yes, there would be potentially some that have gone depending on the weight or whatever, but I would say the majority of children that have been prematurely turned forward could easily be turned rear facing until they reach that minimum of 2 and hopefully beyond.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure we take into some concerns. Sometimes the economics can force you into a situation that you don't want to be in, but nonetheless they're there, and so I think that's helpful.
Yeah. And one of the things that we do too down at the Yale New Haven Children's Hospital, we have the ability to give over 750 car seats a year out to the public throughout the state, not just in the New Haven area. And we do give more than 750 car seats out.
And with that point, I think that's why the education and the awareness factor is probably as important, if not even more important, to educate the public at large. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Boucher, did you have any questions?
No, I'm good.
Good. Yes. Senator Surzio. And then going down.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question. Can you kind of explain physically what happens in a car crash? Is there a recoil reaction too? I mean, is the child being kind of thrown forward and then back again? And how do you protect it, if I'm accurate about that? Thank you.
Yeah, also a very good question. And yes, as we know, children's heads are disproportionately bigger than their body. Than let's say us as adults. So what happens in a frontal collision is they're already going to have forward excursion naturally from that impact, but the weight of their head will force their neck forward in such a violent way that it could literally cause paralysis, death, internal decapitation. So that's one of the things that we're creating, this cradling effect, by keeping them rear facing. So in a rear facing position in a properly installed seat, the body, the shell absorbs it, it dips. There is no head excursion. There is no forward body excursion. They're cradled. When they're forward, it is absolutely. So while we'd love to keep, like my son, rear facing even longer, we determined based on, evidence that a 2 was a reasonable baseline. But yes, there are severe injuries for frontal head collisions, and we see those a lot at the hospital.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I was just listening to Senator Leone made a comment because, he's a veteran. He said that when he used to fly on some of these planes, they would all be facing backwards for those same reasons that you testified. So, yes, Representative Devlin, nice to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nice to see you, too. Thank you for your testimony, Rep. Kupchick. Always a pleasure to see you, the Transportation Committee, and your guests here as well. You've certainly outlined, I think, the statistics that reinforce, at least for me, why this would be important legislation to support. But I do want to go back to some of the points that Senator Leone was making regarding education. So you actually, in Rep. Kupchick's testimony, you reference a child seat safety course through the DMV that if you are an offender, you take this course. What I'm curious about is prior to an offense, how parents would have access to this, and then also with the 150 or so child seats that are given away each year, what kind of education do you offer around that, and then how would we support this new legislation?
Okay, thank you. Yes, awareness and education is the key to this, and it is the reason why currently, at the current law or not, 73% of seats are misused or misinstalled. So one of the things we do at the hospital, and places do throughout the state, police stations, fire stations, if they're what's called a Department of Transportation approved fitting station, a parent can go there on an appointment or to a clinic, and in Fairfield, the Fairfield Police Department actually sent 5 officers through our training class and want to run a wonderful program now. And I think whenever a legislation is enacted, it's a great time for us to get an awareness campaign out there. And I know at Yale New Haven Children's Hospital, we offer a fitting station where every week people can make an appointment and come, and we spend about a half an hour with each family, and we educate them on everything about the seat, how to install it, and moving forward, and the best practices. So I would envision some sort of PR or marketing campaign to go along with this legislation to state the simple facts of why and where you can go to seek, because there are a lot of places you can go. People just don't know to even look for it. So by us just telling them, go to this website or go to this, we can tell them, okay, now they've got 80-something places in the state that they can go to. So it's up to them. We can't force them, and what we do as technicians is we educate the parents and caregivers. It's up to them to make the decision. We can't force it upon them.
Right.
But in my 13, 14 years of experience, I rarely have someone that doesn't listen if you explain it to them well.
Great. Thank you.
And as just to point out,
Yes.
your mention of the statute, Section D, or 5D, about the violators class, I feel that's very important because we are one of the only, if not the only state that does this. And I know personally the instructors that teach that class. So if you are written a summons by a police officer that falls under this law, you are required to go to this class. And if you don't, you face license suspension automatically. And as you can imagine, 99% of the people that show up are angry at the police officer. They didn't do it. It's not their fault. They're mad. When they leave, they're thanking the instructors because they didn't know. They didn't know any better. And they leave with this knowledge of, oh my God, now I'm so lucky to this point that my child's been safe, but now moving forward, they can really be safe.
I would just think there might be some value to that education in advance as opposed to waiting until you have a violation.
Absolutely.
Right. And to add to that point, it's an excellent point. What we're trying to do is get the word out to pediatricians and all the pre-delivery, and anyone that is scheduled to come. I know at the Yale Children's Hospital, they actually get a letter in their 4th month of pregnancy to get a car seat, to get to come to one of the fitting stations. They actually get a list of where they can go. And then if by some chance they miss it and they get at the hospital, they can't leave our hospital without having a car seat for their child, and we have the ability to install it while they're there before they leave.
Excellent.
So,
And just to note that that violation piece is in our current statute, and the police departments do like that because they feel they have that opportunity now to train. And that you make an awesome point. I think they should be handing this out or even teaching it at the hospitals when new parents are leaving,
Right.
with their car seats in the car.
we just make assumptions that healthcare providers know what the law is and know what the best practice is. So we've actually trained pediatricians. We have now 2 on our own staff, docs that are trained certified techs, and appreciate what actually goes into the training.
It's been a long time since I took a baby home from a hospital, but that was a very frightening day, let me tell you.
Then you have the whole special health care needs on top of it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Devlin.